Welcome back to Live with Chris. This is a need-to-know guide to Amy Tan's novel, The Bonesetter's Daughter. For more videos about The Bonesetter's Daughter, as well as other literature guides, be sure to subscribe via the link below, where you'll also find a free knowledge organiser to accompany your continued study of the book. Amy Tan is an American writer whose mother and father moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in the mid-20th century from their homeland of China. In her memoir, Where the Past Begins, Amy Tan recognises that most of the novels that she's written are in part autobiographical. The characters, events and relationships that feature in each one of these books are in part taken from Amy Tan's family and life growing up as a young person in America. Referring to the Bonesetter's Daughter specifically, the way in which Ruth and her mother Luling grow closer by the end of the book is reminiscent of Tan's own relationship with her own mother, who also suffered from heart disease and Alzheimer's, much like Luling in the novel. Tan also explains in her memoir that these health troubles that were suffered by her mother prompted her to do a little bit more research or discovery about how her life was before she initially moved to America. This again is reminiscent of Ruth organising for Luling's memoir to be translated in the middle of the book, and hence growing a closer bond between her and her estranged mother. Additionally, the idea of channeling dead relatives, parental suicide, and not knowing her mother's real Chinese name are all elements that actually happened in Amy Tan's life and that she's used in her book, The Bonesetter's Daughter. In The Bonesetter's Daughter, Amy Tan explores the idea of cultural identity. Both she, as a writer, and her character Ruth have a mix of Chinese and American heritage. This causes quite a significant amount of internal conflict. In addition to that, the theme of mother-daughter relationships is another significant talking point within the book, and is one that is very closely tied to the previous idea of cultural identity. Women like Amy Tan or her character Ruth Lu Yi-young are sometimes described as first-generation Americans. This means they were born in the US to immigrant parents. In Tan and Ruth's experience, this brings with it a great deal of cultural conflict, as well as disagreement or disconnection from one's parents. Language is a motif that commonly appears in The Bonesetter's Daughter. Ruth, like Amy Tan herself, is not fluent in written Chinese. This means that a young Ruth is unable to fully grasp the beauty or poetry of Luling's Chinese calligraphy that she writes for local businesses, only noticing the mundane English translations that accompany them. This is mirrored in Luling's relationship with her own mother, Precious Auntie, who was unable to communicate fully due to a failed suicide that left her mute. It is not until Luling's memoir is translated that the cultural boundaries between her and Ruth begin to fall, and their relationship is able to flourish. The memoir also symbolises another of the book's main themes, that being our connection to the past. At the beginning of the book, Ruth seems lost. Her relationship, job and health are all faltering. She is translating her mother's memoir one sentence per week, but seems distracted and uncommitted. Similarly, Luling has suffered a harsh and demanding life ever since moving to America. Ruth's father died very young, and Luling has raised a young girl alone. In addition, she has always lived with the shame of having been born outside of wedlock and feeling responsible for her mother's suicide. It is not until Ruth has Luling's memoir professionally translated that her mood and outlook begin to change. She comes to learn all about the incredible life Luling had lived before Ruth was born, as well as her courage, sacrifice and defiance that she had previously no knowledge of. This information allows Ruth to contextualize a lot of Luling's behaviour when she was a child and establish a greater sense of respect and affection for her mother. Ironically, Luling's Alzheimer's allows her to overcome much of the shame and guilt that she had previously felt about her life in China. What is ordinarily a cruel and devastating disease seems to prompt Luling into speaking more openly about her real mother in public. Although Ruth initially thinks that she is mistaken, it eventually becomes apparent that Luling is in fact correct about Baomo Mu, or Precious Auntie. By the end of the book, Luling can almost remember her own mother's Chinese name, a piece of information that has been lost to her for years. This reconnection with the past creates greater connection, and therefore affection, between the two women in the present. Lastly, the presence of ghosts, superstition, and curses abound in the book. These motifs are in part connected to the theme of cultural conflict and a key way in which Chinese beliefs strongly contrast with that of the West. Ruth and many readers are led to believe that Luling's belief in Precious Auntie's ghost and the family curse come from primitive superstitions that are common to the Chinese. However, as we read Luling's memoir, we come to see that these superstitions are not applicable to everyone in China. Luling's first husband, for example, Kai Jing, is a passionate scientist who reassures Luling that there is no such thing as a curse. It is purely bad luck that her mother, Precious Auntie, suffered the twin tragedy of losing both her father and fiancé on the same day. Luling's superstitiousness is not helped by the fact that Kai Jing is later killed by Japanese troops, and it is understandable how Luling suffers from confirmation bias and sees this as yet another manifestation of the curse. But Ruth and the reader can most likely see that this too is yet another cruel twist of fate that leads us to pity Luling rather than see her beliefs as irrational or primitive. Finally, it is a curious choice that Tan makes Ruth a ghost writer at the beginning of the book. This may imply that she too is haunted or disconnected from her past, and as such she can only overcome this by making more of an effort to bond with her mother. Consequently, the end of the novel sees Ruth writing her own book, having successfully reconnected with her heritage and exorcised her demons. The main stylistic choice that Amy Tan has made is to make the novel a non-linear narrative. The first section of the book focuses primarily on Ruth and moves forward and backward in time, exploring her experiences with her mother Luling. This part of the book creates quite a significant amount of conflict, misunderstanding and sadness between the two characters, as neither of them can really deal with or communicate their respective emotions with one another. The narrative then shifts to Luling's early life, courtesy of the memoir. The reader immediately comes to see that Luling was not always the hostile, superstitious person that she has become in older age. We learn about Luling's own mother, Baomo Mu, the tragic event of her death and the profound impact that it had on a young Luling's life. But there are also other moments where we see Luling as brave, resilient and sacrificial, elements of her life which Ruth and the reader had previously no idea of up until this point. The non-linear narrative, therefore, allows Amy Tan to underline the importance of connecting with one's past or heritage. It helps to contextualize the present and develop relationships with those around you. Amy Tan's experiences as a first-generation American with Chinese parents inspires much of the conflicts and style of communication that we see between Ruth and Luling in The Bonesetter's Daughter. Tan emphasizes the importance of overcoming boundaries between mothers and daughters before it's too late. The likes of culture, language and values may stand in between a mother and daughter pair such as Ruth or Luling, but Amy Tan seems to be arguing that these can be negotiated with in order to achieve a greater amount of affection and respect for one another before it's too late. One key way to overcome such barriers is to reach into the past. Learning more about one's family not only teaches you about yourself and your individual identity, but it connects you with the rest of your family through a shared sense of heritage. If you found this analysis useful, then be sure to subscribe and like via the links below, and don't forget there is a free knowledge organizer in the description to help with your continued study of The Bonesetter's Daughter. If you have any questions about the novel, then be sure to get in touch via the comments section below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again for watching, and best of luck with your study of the book.